Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 4 edition, as I'm counting on my fingers how many weeks you played. Yep, Week 4 it is. I am your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, I got to get your take real quick, and we don't have to rehash what we saw Monday night. Does it make us old men on the lawn guys when there's 2 Monday night football games instead of the traditional 1?
Now that you said there was 2, it's jogging my memory on what actually transpired Monday night.
No defense is what transpired, and it was Jacksonville attempting to play with 9 men, it appeared, against the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah. I mean, Jacksonville, we told you, was going to be the sharp side there. You couldn't have paid me to get there because I don't believe in what they're doing defensively with their current talent. So that was not surprising.
Wait, you mean playing man coverage when your entire starting defensive backfield is out isn't a great approach against Josh Allen? How dare you try and cast aspersions at Ryan Nielsen?
I was a little more surprised with the other game, obviously, and how bad Lou Anarumo's defense was. And give credit to what Jaden Daniels is doing. And that offense certainly opened itself up. And winning outright was something I did not have on the bingo card, although very sharp money there on the Commanders plus the points. This is a really fun matchup this week with Washington and Arizona. I know we're not going to talk about it at great length, and there's certainly been some market adjustment on that total. There was actually under money coming in on game day on Washington and Cincinnati, got to 45.5, and I'm just sitting there like, what am I missing? Certainly there's been a market correction there with that total now at 50.5, and it'll be interesting to see where that next move is on that Washington Cardinals total. But yeah, there wasn't a ton of takeaways for me there on Thursday night. We're going to be talking about the Bills a little bit later against the Ravens in the Sunday night affair, so don't want to divulge too much there until we discuss that game.
Nope, we will indeed get there. One thing I will say, give a shout out to our man Billy. Gets home with his props on both games. Hopefully all of our listeners are following him on Twitter. I know you and I got a chuckle out of the exchange. There were reasons that he decided to go under with Keon Coleman receptions. That information became apparent when we find out that Keon Coleman was not going to play the first couple of series. I know folks on Twitter love justification, but look, guys and girls, we don't roll out of bed. I know the results haven't been there in the NFL. We're not rolling out of bed flipping coins. Everything is with an edge. Sometimes you end up on the wrong side of the ledger, but the man does his homework. He's offering a prop, even if he can't justify exactly why, for Keon Coleman. Gets home with relative ease on the under reception number. But Thursday night football, familiar foes, renew acquaintances at MetLife Stadium, Payne, between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. And you mentioned total movement. We're starting to see this thing take a little bit of under money as we're recording at this point. The 45.5 is clearing out, trending now towards 44.5 for a total that did open as low as 43.5. You're looking at Dallas having been bet up from a bottom of the market at -4 out to 5.5. And when we look at Dak Prescott, he's won 12 straight starts against the Giants. Only 3 quarterbacks have won more consecutive games against a single opponent. Bob Greasy, who owned the Buffalo Bills, winning 17 straight. Tom Brady winning 13 straight against the Buffalo Bills as well. Sorry, Bills fans. And Steve Young, who knocked off the Rams 13 times in a row. When we look at the Cowboys, they've won 6 of the past 7 road meetings against the Giants, including 3 straight, outscoring the Giants 206 to 108 in those 7 games. That's not lost on Daniel Jones, who pretty much said we have to be better, and these are the games we need to win. When we look at the Cowboys, they've covered those numbers. They've been outstanding. And meanwhile, Daniel Jones, not exactly the best quarterback when it's not a 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff, just 5-21 straight up, almost developing the Kirk Cousins complex under the bright lights. But when we look at this game, the Cowboys... What's up?
Nothing. I was just about to say you gave him the old Kirk Cousins treatment.
I did have to give the Kirk Cousins
treatment. Is Daniel
treatment.
Jones good in any time slot?
He has actually been better in the 1 o'clock Eastern time slot. But when we look at where he is at late in the afternoon, one of the worst the league has ever seen. But I guess bad quarterbacks, this tends to happen. Maybe it's past his bedtime and when normal accounting hours would otherwise be over. When we look at this game, the Cowboys offense clearly looking for playmakers to emerge.
Was that his degree at Duke? He was an accounting major?
Might have to check. I mean, he might need to fall back on it sooner rather than later, but I digress. He was good last week against the Browns, so I don't want to try and vilify the guy. CeeDee Lamb, the one weapon we know the Cowboys have. They're looking for other players to emerge. Defensively for Dallas, well, they've left a lot to be desired, at least through the early going. The one data point that looked good on the surface against the Cleveland Browns no longer holds water when we see what the Browns did against these very same Giants and what they couldn't do against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who couldn't stop a nosebleed against the Buffalo Bills. On the other side, for the Giants offensively, look, we know Malik Neighbors is an absolute beast. They found something in Devin Singletary as a runner and a receiver. But if you're trying to identify one matchup that determines either the ATS result or the total tonight, what are you most intrigued to watch on a short week between divisional rivals?
Kind of a loaded question there, and I'm a touch surprised we are seeing some under money here now, because at 43.5, once the weather didn't look like it was in play, I kind of agreed with that move over at 43.5 below the key of 44. To me, both offenses had some intriguing aspects to them. We've seen Dowdle get hit in the prop market. He took a majority of the run snaps last week, and I think the Giants' defensive line is probably the unit on the team we think is best, but they have really struggled against running back runs, allowing nearly 5.5 yards a carry, a 60% success rate to running back runs, and we know the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy seem intent on trying to establish that ground game despite running backs not being overly efficient. And then you have a situation where for Dak Prescott, this could look good, right? I mean, stepping down in class against this Giants defense, the offensive line, where we had some question marks coming into the season, some of that young talent, some of those new pieces being moved around has really looked good, 6th in pass block win rate. And so when the Giants are not getting pressure because of the style of play they're using in the secondary, where it's, hey, let's not get beat deep, we're going to allow a lot of completions in front of us. When the Giants don't get pressure, they're allowing 82% completion rate. And so I'm just kind of thinking about this in my head, where Dallas is stepping down in class. Dallas has been protecting well. If the Giants don't get pressure, there's probably going to be a lot of completions. If Mike McCarthy decides to be stubborn and continue to run the ball, there should be more success on the ground based upon what the Giants have done through 3 data points. The other side, which is somewhat interesting to me, and we don't have to deep dive this, but more of a concise viewpoint there, is you'd be thinking the Giants have trouble pass protecting, and it's the right mindset. Now, they are relatively better compared to the disaster they've been the last 2 seasons, but they're still bottom of the league. The one difference that we have noticed with Brian Daboll taking over play calling duties is he's made it very apparent to have some checks and balances for Daniel Jones for when he gets pressured. And so the Giants are still allowing pressure at the second highest rate in under 2.5 seconds, but the Giants are 12th in EPA per dropback when pressured. So there's a lot more valves for Daniel Jones. Daboll's done a very good job saying, hey, we're expecting pressure. There's a lot more outlets for when pressure comes. And so the Giants have been substantially better in that area. And then you're looking at a Dallas defense who, when they do not get pressure, have been an abject disaster. That secondary has been beaten and battered. They really missed Deron Bland. So it just kind of felt like it was time for the Dallas offense to get right. There was a buy on Dallas earlier this week. And the Giants' offense has made some material improvements from a season ago. So at 43.5, it made sense. Let's see if it gets back there. There's some 44.5 in the market now, and We just have, at this point, an ability to sit back. Let's continue to potentially monitor some weather. Right now, it looks a little clearer than we anticipated earlier in the week. And if you can get below that key of 44, then it becomes interesting again at 43.5 for me.
A game that takes on, no doubt, added intrigue when you watch this Cowboys more than stub their toe last week against the Baltimore Ravens. And, of course, when you look at what the Giants did against the Cleveland Browns, going on the road, winning that game outright, as both teams would love to get out of this week at 2-2, knowing that this division looks slightly more intriguing on paper than it would have before the season started. Speaking of intriguing divisions, Payne, on Sunday we have one of the marquee matchups of the weekend taking place at Lambeau Field. And when we look at what's about to transpire here, we're still not sure who's going to be under center for the Green Bay Packers. Market sitting with Green Bay, a 2.5-point favorite, total on the game 43.5. We're not at a key of 3 yet, at least at most shops, or a key as far as the total at 44, at least at most shops. And when we look at series history between these two divisional foes, they've split the regular season series over each of the last 4 seasons. Last year, a little bit of an anomaly. The road team won both meetings, each by 14-plus points. When we look at some of the trends around the familiarity here, the Packers 7-1 against the number of the last 8 divisional games as a home favorite. Matt LaFleur has been good against teams he sees frequently, 19-11 against the spread against divisional opponents as the Packers head coach, including a 10-5 mark against the number when playing at Lambeau. We look at the Minnesota Vikings, and this was a team coming into the year that I think you and I were both higher on. We kicked the tires on potentially going over 6.5. Probably regret not having that ticket in the portfolio. And as a result, you look at the Vikings having the second best scoring differential, plus 55, through 3 games in team history when they were plus 67 back in 1975. They've led the most of any team in the NFL this season for 2 hours, 35 minutes, and 38 seconds. And that doesn't come against soft competition, pulling outright upsets at home in Week 2 against the 49ers, Week 3 against the Houston Texans. When we look at the injury report for the Vikings, Garrett Bradbury and Ivan Pace were DNPs. Maybe not a bad thing when you look at some of the numbers pressure-wise that Bradbury has dealt with. Jordan Addison trending up to give the Vikings a weapon. But when we start with Minnesota offensively, look, Sam Darnold has answered the bell. He is clearly benefiting from the tutelage of Kevin O'Connell. It's a homecoming game for Aaron Jones, who no doubt will have a chip on his shoulder looking to try and continue his start to the season. Justin Jefferson is an absolute nightmare to contend with, matched up against the Green Bay defense, who hasn't had to be great, but they've done enough to allow this team to win back-to-back games with Malik Willis under center.
Yeah, we were thinking about buying the Vikings very close to the start of the season, but to use your or expound upon your analogy there, all we have is a little rubber on the toe of our sneaker. We never actually got there. The Vikings are on a roll, right? I mean, they're well coached, they're buttoned up, they're playing tough. There's enough talent there. We did have high expectations for Sam Darnold coming into the season. You'd be hard-pressed to find higher expectations anywhere, whether it's a fantasy guy, a film guy, another better. And Darnold's even played above that expectation that we had for him. 5th best QBR, 5th best completion percentage over expectation, all 3 levels of throws, whether it's short, intermediate, and deep. Darnold has a passer rating of at least 105. The turnover-worthy play rate is only 2%. And the interesting part about this is the Vikings O-line has played below expectation. 21st in pass block win rate. You have a stud right tackle in Brian O'Neill who's playing through some things. Sam Darnold is playing out, without some of his best weapons as well, right? Jordan Addison's missed time with the ankle injury. Hawkinson's still not back from the knee surgery. It is possible Addison returns this week. I think that'd be huge because we do have some questions in Green Bay's secondary past Jair Alexander. Some of those ancillary weapons, especially inside, do quite well against that Packers defense. Now, kind of overarching market thought here is you probably want to sell some of your Sam Darnold stock right now, and it would be impossible to maintain what he's done, especially looking at like a double-digit touchdown rate. That's just unsustainable. It would probably be wise to buy some shares of Jeff Hafley's defense right now. And if you've listened to the Packers players during their pressers, this week and in post-game comments after Tennessee, they've talked about feeling more comfortable, right, in Hafley's scheme, that it was taking some time to get adjusted, and this is a more traditional style of offense in Minnesota, right? It's not Jalen Hurts and his mobility. It's not Anthony Richardson and his mobility. And, while the Vikings offense has been light years better than the Titans, there are some hints of similar concepts, right? Brian Callahan is from the Zach Taylor coaching tree, who learned under McVay. Kevin O'Connell is from the McVay coaching tree. So there are some similarities that this Packers defense will see back-to-back weeks. We haven't seen Hafley be as aggressive as we all anticipated coming into the season, 30th in blitz rate through 3 games. It did tick up just a little bit last week. I would think there's another uptick here, knowing Sam Darnold has been lights out when kept clean, knowing Sam Darnold, can't really beat you with his legs, and he's probably not 100%. He's going to play, obviously, but that was an interesting injury that he went down for last week and was down for a little while.
Yeah, looked a lot worse. I was stunned when you texted me during the course of that game when I flipped off that, look, Sam Darnold's getting back in the game.
Yeah, it was a little surprising with how long he was down for. You also, center Garrett Bradbury on the injury report with an ankle injury of his own, did not practice on Wednesday. I mentioned Brian O'Neill at right tackle playing through some things, not 100% there. There is a clear edge for Minnesota's offense, though. If I'm Kevin O'Connell, I probably take some of the game away from Sam Darnold early, especially if Addison isn't out there. I would kind of lean towards him being out there, but something to monitor for sure. I would let Aaron Jones get his revenge on the Packers, right? And it's not just for spite, even though I'm a big spite guy. There's a really good path here. Like, Jones has been an efficiency monster, 50% rushing success rate through 3 games. He looks explosive. 14% of his runs have gone 10-plus yards. Dynamic as a pass catcher. The Packers' defense is bottom 10 in the NFL against running back runs. Bottom 10 in the league against running back reception. So this feels like a game where you want to let Aaron Jones cook a little bit, and if it means getting revenge, then that's just the icing on the cake, so to speak.
I just want to know if Aaron Jones gets into the end zone, if he's going to pull off a Lambeau leap. That's all I want to see.
I hope he does. I hope he does everything.
And I have to imagine Packer fans who actually like Jones quite a bit, they weren't thrilled when the Packers decided to go in a different direction and bring in Josh Jacobs. The one team that we continue to ask ourselves why they didn't make a push for Aaron Jones is the team that we broke down early already in the Dallas Cowboys, who I'm sure would love to have that level of production from a former UTEP player there.
Jerry Jones came out and said Derrick Henry was too expensive. Expensive. So my guess is that would be his same response for Aaron Jones.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what happens, I guess, when Jared wants to spend money where he wants to spend it. So when we look on the other side of the ball, Payne, Minnesota defensively, I mean, Brian Flores has been outstanding. I mean, this is a team first in sacks, first in total quarterback pressures. The pass D has allowed just 2 passing touchdowns and 5 picks. I mean, Jonathan Grenard has been a perfect fit. He got his measure of revenge against the Houston Texans last week. And we look at what some of these other players are doing. I mean, ageless wonders in the defensive backfield, and Harrison Smith and Stephon Gilmore, who have really reaped the benefits, while Byron Murphy has struggled a bit, or at least did against the Houston Texans, against the Packers offense, who we can't sugarcoat it. We're not sure what we're going to see from Green Bay. Will it be Jordan Love? Will it be Malik Willis? And if it is Willis, can Matt LaFleur develop a distinct game plan for the 3rd consecutive week? Because those of us who watched against the Colts, it was one thing. It was completely different last week against the Tennessee Titans. And lo and behold, we're looking at a Green Bay offense that should be a little bit healthier with their skill position players, but at the same time would love to have their franchise quarterback back under center for this divisional matchup.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And it's partly the reason we're seeing some moves in the market. There's been a clear sell high on the Vikings in the market this week. There's been a clear buy in the Packers in anticipation of Jordan Love's return based upon what we all saw last week, right? That he was out there and practiced every single day. Now, how many first-team reps did he get against the Titans, or ahead of the Titans game? Not a ton, right? And that was Matt LaFleur allowing the beat reporters access to get Jordan Love playing hopscotch all week long and pushing it out to the media. And we just did not anticipate him playing, and that's why we went ahead and grabbed the money line and -1.5, and obviously it did not come home, but was a game where if you can lay 1.5 in the NFL and have it close 3, you're feeling pretty good about your work prior to kickoff. We'll see if Love ultimately plays, and if Love does, how healthy is he? And I think we'll know that answer early, because Brian Flores blitzes at the 2nd highest rate in the league, and so Flores is going to put Love on the move early to know what he can do and can't do, and that'll effectively help Flores figure out what he can call the rest of the game. So we will have a very good idea if Love goes as to how healthy he is and what he can actually do in and outside the pocket. I think, to your point and how you set this up, there is a non-zero chance it's Malik Willis again. So there's variance within this side of the matchup. If Love isn't 100%, there just aren't as many paths. Minnesota has done an outstanding job against the run, and Josh Jacobs hasn't been overly efficient. Now, he's been much better than last season, but clearly hasn't returned to the 2022 form. But Minnesota right now 5th in run-stop win rate, 1st in schedule-adjusted rush efficiency. So, again, if Love isn't healthy, is there going to be a complementary ground game there? I'm not so sure. The one area where, whether it's Love or Malik Willis, you really want to attack Minnesota in the slot, it seems. And that's where your horse is, in Jaden Reed. He lives in the slot 84% of the time. That's where Reed's lining up. We know when Flores does blitz, he loves playing zone behind it. And Reed has been the Packers' leading target share man against zone defense. So there is a path here for Reed if it's Love under center. Malik Willis probably just isn't going to have the pass volume. Now, when he does throw, he's been very accurate, and it's kind of that layup or three approach that we've seen a lot of these offenses kind of steal from the NBA, where, if Malik Willis is out there, we're going to have him throwing, short screens like we saw on the touchdown against the Titans last week. We're going to be using his legs, or we're just going to, take a deep shot down the field. So where if he does connect, we're getting the upside. But if it's Love under center, I think Jaden Reed sees a big uptick this week, especially in the slot, especially against zone defense that Flores likes to employ here, Todd.
When we look at the side, do we figure it just goes 2.5 to 3 if Jordan Love is upgraded and the total ticks up the same, 43.5 to 44.5? Because it feels like right now
it's going to uptick both directions. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say it feels like we're in hybrid territory at this point, where books are.
And then the handicapping comes out.
Yep. That's what I was going to say. It's always the question that we have is, just because a quarterback is inserted into the lineup, can't always assume he's going to be 100% in a return to action.
So the early moves are basically, right, like you're selling Minnesota at the top of the market. You're anticipating that Jordan Love's going to play based upon the practice reports we see. So you kind of just blindly get your money into the market.
Yep.
And then once it becomes official, then you start handicapping this game. And that's kind of the approach that we've seen to this point. But once it hits the screen, and once that Schefter tweet comes out that says Jordan Love's playing, right, the market's going to go bananas. And then at this point, you've kind of figured out what that means and what you want to do. And so you will get that initial movement. Does that initial movement continue to does the current keep pushing in that direction, or do we start to see some buyback on both that side in total once we've kind of reached the perceived peak of that announcement?
It is always a nuanced handicap with the life cycle for the NFL when numbers are released on Sunday until kickoff the following week. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, as always, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And if you haven't already subscribed to the Bet the Board podcast newsletter, again, not sure what you're waiting for. Justin Herbert under 31.5 yards, longest completion. You had to get there, had to get it early, coming in the newsletter before Herbert was potentially downgraded. Number pulled off the board, and a rocking chair winner with a 27-yard completion, being the best on his ledger last week. Any additional way that we can help get you guys and girls to the window, that's what we're here for. And all we ask is that you sign up for the Bet the Board podcast newsletter delivered right to your inbox each and every Friday through football season. Another early game, Payne, is a familiar foes doing battle, and not from a divisional standpoint, but last year it was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers ending the Philadelphia Eagles season in the wild card round. Tampa beat the Eagles 32-9, and it pretty much put a bow on Philadelphia limping to the finish. Meanwhile, when we look at the Eagles, they snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Saquon Barkley, a massive run. Defense put together a signature performance, and they sit at 2-1 on the campaign for playing their second straight road game in as many weeks against an NFC South opponent. When we look at the betting market on this particular contest, we're talking about Philadelphia, a modest 1.5 to 2 point road favorite. Total did open as high as 47. We're now looking at a 43 kind of painted across the screen at this juncture. And we can say what we want about handicapping the X's and O's, but for me, this boils down to the players that may or may not be available. And when we start with Philadelphia on the offensive side, A.J. Brown dealing with a hamstring injury. Devontae Smith in concussion protocol. Lane Johnson, concussion protocol. Mekhi Becton, Landon Dickerson along the offensive line, also limited in Wednesday practice. Meanwhile, for the Bucs on the other side, a variety of offensive linemen injured there. Graham Barton, Luka Decky, Tristan Wirfs, Bucky Irving dealing with a hamstring, but signs do point to the return of the big fella in the middle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Vita Vea. It doesn't appear that Kalijah Kancey will be back in the fold or Antoine Winfield. So I present all of that to ask you this. Is it even worth discussing some of the X's and O's or trying to assess what the market has done with all of this information that should be baked into the proverbial cake?
It's a good question, and I am going to filibuster here for a minute because this game is currently on the old move here.
It's like the phone lines are bugged.
To deter what we had planned. Well, you're seeing this in real time, folks.
This is how it works when you have professional bettors trying to multitask on a Thursday morning when the board is lighting up.
Okay. You mentioned the injuries. I'm not sure how far you dove into them, but certainly
cluster injuries more than anything else. Just kind of as a general rule of thumb,
as it comes to like the concussion stuff, for instance, like how many players have played with the concussion under the new rule system? Very few. I mean, it's a minute grouping, and that process is day to day, right? You show up at practice on Wednesday, go through a couple tests. Did you clear them? Yep. Then you go on to Thursday. Did you clear those tests? Yep. You go on to Friday. And so it's this gradual 5-day process.
It's like playing The Legend of Zelda. You got to get to each level.
And so if you're not there on Wednesday and you're not going through these, it's probably a sign that you're not going to be out there. And that's kind of been the case for a couple of these key Eagles players. We'll see what ultimately unfolds, but that's where we're at. In terms of like key factors, I think there's two to this game, one on each side. Baker has been extremely sensitive to pressure. One of those injuries you mentioned was, I believe, right tackle Luke Gadecki, who did return on a limited basis to practice on Wednesday, so I think today's the big day to monitor that, if he can get in a full or if he's actually out on the field. But Tampa's also played two elite pressure defenses. The Broncos, number 2 in pass rush win rate, number 1 in blitz rate. So they want to light you up. Detroit, 7th in pass rush win rate, 7th in blitz rate. So another team that's getting after you with Aiden Hutchinson. I'm interested to see what Vic Fangio does here, right? Does he keep that 5-man front that he employed against the Saints last week that was really, really successful? Or does he go back to his traditional style of defense? And I think that's important because the first 2 weeks, the Eagles couldn't sniff the quarterback. And if you go back to that and Luke Gadecki is up, the Buccaneers starting right tackle, you kind of have this element where you're thinking Baker's going to be a little bit cleaner than you would like if you're an opposing team, and Baker's completing 79% of his passes when kept clean, averaging over 8 yards per attempt, both of those marks top 10 in the NFL. And you think about Baker potentially having time with Godwin moving back to the slot, something we had outlined in our previews. He leads the Bucs in targets. The Eagles are the worst defense through 3 games defending the slot, so something to think about there. Mike Evans isn't facing a team with an elite shutdown outside corner like Patrick Surtain Jr. at this point. Not saying some of those draft picks the Eagles made in the secondary can't develop into something, but like this current moment on Sunday, there isn't a Patrick Surtain Jr. out there. Vic Fangio also primarily runs a zone coverage scheme. Again, if he's going to use his typical stuff, Baker has been exponentially better against zone during his Bucs career. So I think those are a couple of things to look at. On the other side, it would obviously be a huge loss if Lane Johnson is out, and we've seen the Eagles O-line play drop off a cliff when he's not on the field, and there's no Jason Kelce to help out. So, who is that veteran guy? I guess it's Mulata. If A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are out, and both are kind of, I think, trending that way, it's trouble. You mentioned Vita Vea returning to practice with a knee brace. That was thought to have been a 2 to 4 week injury, but then last week, if you followed it, it was suddenly a day-to-day injury. We saw him out there on Wednesday with a big knee brace. I would have him trending towards playing. What's interesting here is like the Buccaneers have been very, very good defending wide receivers and tight ends. Where they have been horrific is defending running backs. And so, inherently, right, like 31st in EPA, dead last in success rate at 64%, right, defending running back passes. So this could very well be another Saquon Barkley game. Without Vita Vea, they have been like sliding a hot dog down a hallway in terms of running defense, right? They can't stop the run. So that would be the path that you would employ. But all of a sudden, when you're a defense and you don't have to worry about an A.J. Brown, you don't have to worry about a Devontae Smith, now you can start allocating resources to stopping the ground game, right? And so, like, how effective does Saquon Barkley become if he's the focal point of the defense? And so that's kind of where this gets a little bit interesting, and partly why we have seen this total go under, and partly due to some weather as well.
I was going to say, Mother Nature may have her hand, not just in some of these NFL games on Sunday, but of course, as we monitor the hurricane moving across the southeast and even into the Midwest, will impact some of those college games as well. So always make sure you're doing your homework and that you have all of those tools at your disposal to make some well-informed investments. From Sunday afternoon, we wish there was a late game on the slate that was really worth deep diving, but with a pair of Monday night games, our energies are spread out across the landscape. So we'll go right into Sunday night football, and this should be a hell of a game between the Buffalo Bills, who come in undefeated on the heels of a dominant performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars, playing their third straight game under the lights. The Miami Dolphins on Thursday, Monday Night Football against the Jags, and Sunday Night Football against the Ravens, versus a Ravens team who record-wise is only 1-2, but if you look at this team, from a metric standpoint, significantly better than that, and you can understand why. They're short home favorites in that 2.5 range. Total in this game has leaked up a touch from 45.5 where it opened to 46.5. And you have the top scoring offense in the league, the Buffalo Bills, at 37.3 points per game, versus the top total offense in the league in the Baltimore Ravens, averaging more than 400 yards per contest. When we look at the Bills, they have the second best scoring differential through 3 games in team history. They were plus 74 way back in 1992. That Bills more 34-plus point wins than the rest of the NFL combined in weeks 1 through 5 since 2021. So we've seen this team get off to hot starts. Meanwhile, for Baltimore, scoreboard aesthetics didn't look great against the Dallas Cowboys, but for all intents and purposes, that was a 28-6 game before Dallas rattled off 19 unanswered in the fourth quarter. The one thing that the Ravens have said all week, they need to be better about their discipline. 31 penalties for a total of 278 yards working against them. That includes against the Dallas Cowboys, where they were particularly bad, 13 penalties for 105 yards. The Bills, when you look at this team, the faces remain largely changed, especially on the defensive side. The results have been good. But let's start with Josh Allen in the offense, Payne. 4 passing touchdowns in the first half, tied for the most in the first half in Bills history. We've seen the rapport continue to develop with Khalil Shakir, who currently leads the NFL in receiving EPA, caught all 14 targets from Josh Allen this season. And if we go back to last year, Shakir has now caught 27 targets in a row from Josh Allen. So these guys are on the same page. You look at some of the other weapons that the Ravens will have to contend with. And Baltimore, they've been good against the run, leave a little bit to be desired against the pass. Should be a fascinating chess match with Ken Dorsey on one side against a first-year defensive coordinator in Zach Orr.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this thing's going as Josh Allen goes, and we absolutely love Josh Allen. Was a buyer in the fantasy formats that we play this season, and everything just goes through Josh. This is the Bills' toughest test to date. And I'm not poo-pooing anything that's been done here by Buffalo. This was a sell team before the season, not by us, by a lot of professional bettors. And now all of a sudden we're 3 weeks removed from just steady sells on Buffalo and the mindset that Buffalo just wasn't going to be as good this year. Now, we can make drastic changes, and we should, because it looks like Buffalo's a little bit better than that. kind of want to caution a little bit, right? I mean, Arizona is a bottom 10 defense. Miami has struggled with their injuries up front and the guys they let walk in free agency while they're getting acclimated to scheme. They're literally 30th in schedule adjusted efficiency. Jacksonville's defense is not only horrific, but Brian Nielsen chose to be stubborn and played a style that he just didn't have the chess pieces to play with. Right, the idea that you're going to sit there and play heavy man coverage knowing Josh Allen decimates man coverage and you're going to do it with backups is mind-boggling to me. And we sat here Monday morning saying Jacksonville was going to take money. They did, closed fourth, the sharpest shops. It just wasn't for me because Josh Allen torches man coverage. So it doesn't at all shock me that he went out there and torched man coverage to the point where, and maybe that's, Todd, where we have some issues. It's like, I make the largest adjustments week to week on these teams when things happen that I just could not see happening. When players, when teams overcame a situation I couldn't see them overcoming. I don't make the biggest adjustments when you do something that's so fucking obvious that you can do. Right? And that's kind of how, and so, the Bills offense is stepping up in class here. And Baltimore at least mixes their coverages. And I anticipate Zach Orr being more zone-centric, far more than Jacksonville. And Zach also got a very good look at this Bills offense, knowing his former Ravens colleague and best buddy Anthony Weaver already faced this Bills offense, right? They've exchanged notes this week, I can tell you that.
There is no doubt that information has been flowing.
So Baltimore has done a very good job shutting down the run and making offenses one-dimensional. Running backs are averaging a shade over 2.5 yards a carry against Baltimore. I think the Bills have to do a better job, and I've said this, focusing on getting their key weapons the ball. I mean, I understand it was a blowout Monday night, but I think the peanut guy had a catch. The beer vendor had a rushing attempt.
I think Andre Reed even had a catch.
You got to start spamming the best players because you're going to need these guys when the games matter most against the best competition in the playoffs if you're going to make that run, right? The buffet style of offense just isn't for me. And so, I view this as a James Cook catching the ball out of the backfield game. The Ravens are well below average defending running back passes. You mentioned Shakir. I love Kincaid. They should own every single slot route in this game. I don't need to see Curtis Samuel. I've seen Curtis Samuel for 7 fucking years. I don't care that you like him, that they think he's great. I don't want to see it. Okay? and you mentioned this, like when Josh Allen's targeted Shakir the last 2 seasons, 63 of 71 targets have been caught. It is like an efficiency cheat code. Get that kid the ball. The Ravens are bottom 10 in the NFL through 3 games defending the slot. The volume for Kincaid hasn't been there because week 1, who knows? Just the way the wind blew that day. And then the last 2 games make sense because they've been out of reach, right? The games have basically been in garbage time, virtually, right, the entire second halves of both of those games. But it seems like Joe Brady is grasping that Dalton Kincaid needs more targets. He's been seeing more than a quarter of the Bills' first half targets the last 2 weeks. So in a game that's should be more competitive, this should also be a Dalton Kincaid game because you would just expect that target share to extrapolate for 4 quarters instead of just 2. This is a much tougher matchup on a short week for Buffalo. If Joe Brady doesn't want to see a massive dip in efficiency, he just needs to focus on the key cogs of this offense, and it's James Cook catching the ball this game. It's Shakir catching the ball. It's Dalton Kincaid and Shakir both in the slot causing havoc. That's kind of how I see this Bills offense hopefully operating.
And look, I mean, Jake Ferguson, working on about 1.5 legs, was able to torch Roquan Smith in the middle. So if Kincaid isn't going to be your volume monster this week, I'm not sure we're ever going to see it. And to your point, you get your best weapons, the football in space, and allow them to try and go out there and operate to the best of their abilities. Now, on the other side of the ball, Payne, when we look at this Bills defense, the numbers have been good so far. I mean, 3rd in run stop win rate, top 10 in pass rush win rate. We've seen Von Miller getting out there in known passing situations, pinning his ears back and being able to make plays. The Bills clearly knew what they had in Christian Benford, who has emerged as a top cover corner opposite Rasul Douglas. They are still, however, dealing with injuries, and you wonder where those injuries sometimes rear their ugly head. Terrell Bernard still a couple weeks away from playing. Teron Johnson more or less ruled out if you read Sean McDermott or listen to his comments. in the press earlier this week. They'll be matched up against the Ravens offense that runs through Lamar. And when we look at what Lamar has done, 274 rushing yards was the charge that the Ravens put together last week. Him alongside new acquisition Derrick Henry with 250 rushing yards and 5+ rushing yards per attempt through the first 3 games is one of the best marks that we've seen since the Cleveland Browns did it back in 1960. We haven't seen the Ravens passing game really get on track. Isaiah Likely, big game week 1, didn't get heavily involved the previous 2 weeks. Mark Andrews, his usage has completely fallen off a cliff. And look, when you're playing from a positive game state leading by multiple scores, even Zay Flowers doesn't get into the fold. Now, where the questions start to emerge for Baltimore is the injury report. They went through practice yesterday with 3 starting offensive linemen that did not practice in Tyler Linderbaum, Patrick McCarry, and Daniel Voorhees. The silver lining to that is all 3 of them were still on the field for the final drive in crunch time against the Dallas Cowboys when they had to salt the game away. When you look at the Ravens offense matched up against the Bills defense, what are you most intrigued to see come Sunday night under the bright lights?
So, going back to kind of what you said, there are some things there for Baltimore's offense potentially about not getting the tight ends involved as much. Week 1 was a byproduct of the Chiefs understanding that Andrews was the horse, and so they bracketed and doubled and provided help over the top, and obviously Likely went nuts. That's just how little they thought of Isaiah Likely, as crazy as that sounds, and so he went nuts, and then in game 2, Likely snap share dwindled a bunch. And for me, when I start digging into this game a little bit, I went back and looked at the history of Sean McDermott facing Lamar Jackson, and McDermott's won that battle. As you continue to dig a little bit deeper, I decided to mostly dismiss it because it was Greg Roman's offense, which is
a little different than Todd Monken.
Yeah, it's a fastball, and you never know what you're going to get from Todd Monken, right? He's going to come up with a game plan that is far exceeds what Greg Roman's going to do, and we've been praising Todd Monken for years now. He got another shout out yesterday during our Georgia-Bama preview, so if you want to know what's going on Saturday for Georgia-Bama, listen to the College Football Podcast. I believe we spent about 20 minutes there. But through 3 games this season, if you look at Monken, right, he's created a game plan to attack opponent weaknesses. Whether it was the Chiefs, the Raiders, or the Cowboys last week, it just doesn't matter. Baltimore is attacking the deficiency of the defense they're playing that week, and I think he's going to do the same thing here. Arizona showed well offensively for a large stretch in the opener against Buffalo. Skylar Thompson did not. It's a lost Jaguar offense right now. They did not show overly well. They did not attack the areas of weakness. And so, again, this is kind of a step up in class for this Buffalo defense. And you look at the first 3 offenses that Buffalo's faced, like they've consistently thrown outside and deep. There really hasn't been a concerted effort to attack the middle of the field, and I think that's going to change here. I think Todd Monken's going to do that. I think Baltimore has the personnel to do that with those 2 tight ends you mentioned, and Andrews and Likely, and you think about where Zay Flowers likes to operate. Baltimore's top 10 in rate of throws inside, and the Ravens also throw it much shorter. And you look at the Bills' defense right now, like this second, you want to spam the middle of the field with Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard and Teron Johnson and Dotson and Poyer and Hyde all gone or not available. The Bills are the 5th worst in EPA per pass attempt on passes thrown within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, 11th worst in success rate defending those short throws. I think there's some places to attack when you think about that Bills linebacker group and you think about that safety group over the middle with those 2 tight ends. We also know Sean McDermott is uber conservative, and that also leaks over to his defense. The Bills just don't blitz often. Lowest rate in the league through 3 games. Lamar has been substantially better in EPA per dropback when he's not blitzed. The Bills typically live in zone, 7th highest usage rate through 3 games. Lamar, 2nd most sensitive QB with his man-zone splits, substantially better against zone. And within the Bill zone, McDermott uses a lot of too high. Uses too high at the 2nd highest rate. Lamar has been best against that type of zone coverage. So, there are some really, nice things in terms of the throw game here that Baltimore could have success doing if they just attack the right areas, something that none of the first three offenses really did. Arizona did it a little bit more and had success on some of those early drives. Also, if you look at surface level numbers, the Bills' run defense looks great. And I love me some Daquan Jones. He's just kind of the barometer for the Bills' physicality up front. If he's bringing it, everyone else seems to follow. It's just a tone setter there in the middle. I mentioned on the surface, right? Buffalo's third in run stop win rate. They're eighth in schedule-adjusted run defense. But if you start to parse some things out and dig a little bit deeper, yards before first contact is something you guys are probably hearing a little bit more. We started hearing it from us last year, and it's trickled over, and now it's kind of been indoctrinated into the sports world forward-facing a little bit more because we just think it's more predictive of a run metric. Buffalo's 23rd in yards per rush allowed before first contact. When you remove garbage time, the last two games, Buffalo's giving up nearly 2.1 yards per rush before first contact. Inside zone has been a little bit of a problem area for Buffalo's defense. That's one of the Ravens' most frequent run types. So, I'll just be completely forward here. There are large factions looking at Baltimore in this spot. The guys that move the market the most, that get the most money down. Nobody to this point has gotten to the window yet because of what you mentioned, Todd, and that's the Ravens injury report. All four starters along the Ravens offensive line, not named Ron Lee Stanley, were on that injury report. Three of those guys did not practice at all on Wednesday. So today I think is the big day. If you get the Ravens and you see their injury report and all four of those linemen have, a full practice designation on there, wouldn't shock me to start seeing Baltimore trickle up a little bit.
Which, by the way, is unusual because it feels like Ronnie Stanley isn't written into the injury report in pencil. He's always the guy down there in pen, or at least has been over the last couple of seasons. So not to see him on there is always a step in the right direction for his overall health. But there is no doubt that is the marquee game of the Sunday slate. Should be a fun one in terms of helping us determine the pecking order in the AFC. All is not lost for the Ravens as they sit at 1-2, despite a sluggish start out of the gates. You'd like to see the Ravens be able to close out games more effectively than what we've seen, even letting the Cowboys back into the contest. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. And most importantly, as always, be sure to follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. And again, if you're looking for any of your college football needs, Payne highlighted the big game this weekend under the bright lights in Tuscaloosa at Bryant-Denny Stadium. A comprehensive breakdown with Brad Powers. For all things Georgia and Alabama, the boys did an outstanding job covering both sides of the ball, line movement, the matchups they want to watch. And if you're looking for a little bit of NASCAR action, tune into the Stay Green podcast. The playoff race continues to heat up. Chris Wormy and myself break down all the drivers bettors need to know for the race this weekend at Kansas. Best bet portion of the program, and know what we discussed a little bit before we were on air. We know there's the fluidity of the situation. Wanted to pick your brain, kind sir, in terms of what you were thinking for this fine program.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm looking now, let's not sugarcoat this. I think we were looking at the Eagles Buccaneers first half under. It was basically 22.5, 21.5. I think we still feel comfortable as I look around the market and think about our listeners and our proximities here to using that HR 21.5 flat. The only two places that have sponsored this podcast, both 21.5.
One of the more prominent and one of the more prominent offshores too.
Yeah.
You mentioned Pinnacle, another one. You could even buy it from 21 to 21.5 to minus 116.
Not that you would do that.
No.
20 is kind of the key number with first half totals, but and I know everyone's thinking, hey, 3 touchdowns. It doesn't hit as frequently as you think. Knock on wood. Hopefully this isn't that close, but there was some 22.5 out there. We're not going to give that out. Let's call it 21.5 minus 15 under as the official graded price here. Does that work?
Yep. No, I think that works. That's the only reason I brought it up. Again, to your point, no reason to consider buying.
Yeah, I mean, we could all got 22.5. Not that it's a massive number, but when you're thinking about the PAT push back, some weather, you get a fumble, and it lands 22. And you always want to get the best number, even if it's not the most critical number.
100%.
But just for the sake of this, we'll grade it 21.5 minus 15.
Let's do it. 21.5, home of the first half under. Let's get us to the window with defense ruling the day, and hope Mother Nature does her part to create a quagmire down there at Raymond James Stadium amid all the injury concerns, especially to Philadelphia on the offensive side with their weapons. Anything else you'd like to add in terms of things of interest that catch your eye for the weekend and matchups? I mean, I know we've seen a couple battles, which are always fun to try and watch unfold in the market. Not great for betting, but I think for me, the game that I'm most curious to see unfold given the battle, the Rams and the Bears. Won't have $1 in play in that contest, but I'm interested to see exactly what Caleb Williams can provide and how the Rams are able to handle a little bit of prosperity in that improbable comeback win last week against the 49ers.
Yeah, we were a little bit shorter today, a little bit more concise based upon not having the greatest matchups, and then, the hurricane being in play. Wasn't sure. It looked like it was going to hit my area from, about 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. during our record time, and I just wasn't quite sure if this would get nixed or not, so we went a little bit shorter today. I mentioned Washington, Arizona for me as being the game of intrigue just because it's two teams that got bought on in the offseason. It's two teams that are playing a little bit better than we anticipated. Now, I know Arizona's only win is against the Rams, but they were competitive against Buffalo. I really liked some of the second half adjustments they made to that against that Lions offense last week. So that's an intriguing game for me. Kyler should show better this week. He's actually the most sensitive quarterback to zone and man. Struggles mightily against man. He's going to see gobs of zone here from Dan Quinn in that Washington Commanders secondary. He's been elite there. And Washington, again, plays a top 5 zone rate defense. So I think that's one of the interesting matchups I'm looking at there. Yeah, to your point, Rams, Chicago, I just kind of... Unless I have a real opinion, a strong opinion, I'm just going to let those battles play out. That's been the interesting part of this market, both college and pro, and I think a lot of people are wondering, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably consume a lot of content. I try not to because I don't want it to influence my opinion on things, but I do listen to people, or really try to listen to people that are very sharp, and most of those people are not forward-facing. But my understanding is no one's doing overly well. I talked to the groups not doing overly well. I talked to a lot of other professional bettors not starting the season off overly hot. There's just been so much discrepancy. There hasn't been a ton of matches. And then there's been, we're talking about a hurricane this week. This is the third one so far this season. And so volume has been down for a lot of these groups and bettors. It's really been interesting. Last week, Todd, I mean, we found ourselves in battles, and you don't want to go back and talk about games, but we kind of originated the first half over in Baltimore and Dallas, and it looked very easy. Then CeeDee Lamb fumbles at the fucking 7.
And then you're holding on for dear life, just hoping that something chaotic happens.
And the Ravens take 4.5 minutes going from their own 7 to their own 32, and you just want to shoot yourself in the face after their punter pins Dallas deep inside their own 10. And here we go again. This is the positive variance we've not had so far in the fucking early part of the season. So that ends up getting there, but there's a battle, right? Someone comes in under full game, and we valued Andy Dalton substantially better or higher rather than other groups and bettors. And so we got out ahead of that announcement and went over 38 and then let the market settle a little bit and went over 39. And as soon as you get to 41.5, there's massive buyback on. So you have a battle there. It's every game seems to have a battle. And that was a very long-winded way of saying the game you outlined there with Rams and Bears, has had a substantial battle there below the key. Some sharp Chicago money.
Well, and the other game
3,
too,
just a ton of sharp Rams money.
Yeah, and the other game too that's seeing a battle, and that surprised me some. Not to go off on tangents, Kansas City and the Chargers. I mean, look, market entry. Always interesting on a game like this. Justin Herbert, will he or won't he be out there for the Chargers this week, knowing the Chargers...
That's why there's movement.
Right, have an early bye, but there are still heaps of other injuries. And if I'm the Chargers, I'm going, why am I running my quarterback out there potentially with no Joe Alt, no Rashawn Slater, if I can give him 2 weeks to heal up? I get it's a divisional foe, but this is the battle...
That's our thought process.
Yes.
I don't think that's their internal thought process.
No,
and so
I also watched Justin Herbert last
there,
week struggle mightily.
I comprehend all that. But if Justin Herbert's out there, regardless of how limited he is, it can't be 8. Now, the Chiefs can certainly go out there and win by more than 8, but like your preset number can't be 8 if Justin Herbert is out there.
No doubt about it.
That's the battle that we've seen in that. So I agree with you. Like, you put Justin Herbert in there without his 2 tackles, and let's see if this thing can get to like 5. then we're thinking Kansas City at that point. And that's kind of candidly like, we were looking at the Bucs as the side, and I don't really make the business of taking 2. It's better putting it in a teaser. And so the legs that we were looking at there were certainly Tampa and Kansas City, but it's just like I expected some Chargers money to come in, and it seems like they are set on playing Herbert here. We'll see. Like, if I had to guess, it's like 65-35 Herbert goes 65% of the time. Now, I'll be in front of the screen. If not, then that's probably the teaser I'll have queued up there.
Yep. No, it makes a ton of sense. And it's what we do around here. Pull back the curtain a little bit. Share with you guys and girls some of what goes into the process. It's not just flipping on microphones, as you guys know. Everything that has to go into making a bet and a conscientious decision to try and get your money in as best as possible and hope the chips fall where they may. We'll be back with you on Monday, a pair of Monday Night Football games, Titans at Dolphins, and the more intriguing one, at least for me, Lions at Seahawks. I think that one will be a fun one to try and uncover some of the matchups. Billy will be back with some of his props, continue to try and ride the hot hand after the 2-0 performance on Monday. And in the interim, want to wish all of you guys and girls the best of luck with all of your NFL Week 4 investments. And remember, most importantly, with a first-half under ticket on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Philadelphia Eagles in that portfolio come Sunday afternoon. We'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.